With spring coming just around the corner, just a few weeks away now, my thoughts often turn to getting out on the bicycle again. Here in Canada, in southern Ontario even, you have a long layoff between when you get off your bicycle in the late fall and when you can get back on in the spring. Just a great feeling, and I'm really looking forward to getting out on the bike again. I thought I'd get out here in the barn and do a little review of the bike that I typically ride right now. You might want to consider this type, and I'll tell you why. Wow. The wind is really humming on the roof there. So here's the bike I've been riding since 2015. It's called the Surly Long Haul Trucker. So Surly is the make or brand of the bike, and Long Haul Trucker is the model. It's what you call a touring bike, and I'll get into some specifics about those in a minute. Now, when you go into a bike store, you might see different types like mountain bikes, road bikes, racing bikes, cross bikes or cyclocross bikes. You could have gravel bikes, you can have endurance bikes, you can have electric bikes, you can have folding bikes, all different types of bikes, hybrid bikes. It all depends on the type of riding you're going to do as to what type of bike you should get. If you're the average person who wants to ride on the roads, maybe predominantly, but also like to get off on smooth trails. I'm not talking rough mountain bike trails, but gravel roads or smoothly packed bike trails. Then you'll want to consider a bike that has that ability to go on and off pavement and onto rougher roads or these trails. And so in that regard, you have a few options. Some road bikes do come with the option of fitting larger tires, so they can be actually not too bad riding both those types of surfaces. Gravel bikes have characteristics about them that enable them to better tackle both pavement and rougher riding surfaces such as trails and rough roads. And then, as I mentioned, you have another option which are called touring bikes. They're usually a steel framed bicycle, not always, but most of them have steel frames. This particular one has quite a hefty steel frame. This bike is actually made for long distance expedition type touring. A lot of people buy this bike to take on long tours where they're out traveling the roads of the world and trails of the world. And this bike enables you to put lots of packs, and it can carry a large weight. So when you take a look at some of the closer details on this type of bike, what you generally find on a touring bike is you have a long wheelbase. That's primarily to enable a longer chainstay length here. So these bikes typically come in at about 450 plus millimeters of chainstay, and the reason for this is to allow panniers with bags sitting here and not have your heel hit the bags. That's one of the reasons. Also, a long wheelbase provides a more stable, comfortable ride. They often have a lower bottom bracket here as well. They have a more upright handlebar area. Now this bike might have had a couple spacers put in to raise the bar a bit, I'm not sure. But you can see here that my handlebar and the seat are almost at the same level, whereas if you're out on a lot of road bikes these days, you're often higher on the saddle and lower on the front. And this just allows you to sit on the bike with not so much of an arched over position. The other characteristic about touring bikes is they have multiple braze-ons to allow for many options for pack attachment, front and rear. This also has a little nub here to allow you to attach a top tube pump. Often touring bikes are outfitted with Brooks leather saddles just because of their comfort. Another of the main features with a touring bike is a wide range gear set. Triple crank in the front and 9 gears in the back on the cassette. The back cassette is 1132, and then it has 26, 36, and 48 triple crank on it. So that enables you to have a full 27 speeds available to go everything from flatland to steep high hills. And I've climbed quite steep hills with this. Now, I typically haven't used this as a touring bike, although I hope to maybe put it to that use in the future. I've typically used it as a day riding bike. And that's mainly what I want to talk about today. It's a general all-around do-it-all type bike. It's not going to be a really speedy bike out on the road, all that obviously relates to the person pedaling it too. I usually cruise along about 22 to 25 kilometers an hour. And that's not really pushing it, that's just maintaining a fairly steady cadence in a mid-gear range. Certainly, if I pedaled harder, I could get this up over 30 kilometers an hour, but I couldn't maintain it for very long at that speed. Now, one thing I did last year was put mountain bike clip-on pedals on, which I had never used before. I always liked the feeling of my feet being free, and I still do, but I do see the great advantage of having clip-on bike shoes. They just enable you to put so much more power into the stroke. And the main things I observed when I added those was my ability to go into the wind on flat stretches. I can go into the wind much more easier than I used to. I guess because I'm also adding the upstroke strength to my pedal stroke. And also I can go up and over small hills often without downshifting because of the added power of the upstroke, I assume, and maybe greater power on the downstroke too. And the other thing, obviously, the big one thing too, I had always been using fairly spongy running shoes for riding, so they were absorbing a lot of the power I was putting onto the pedal, and the new bike shoes have a very stiff lower surface, so a lot more of my power is being transferred onto the pedal to begin with, even ignoring the fact that they're clipped in. These come off pretty easy with just a side twist. What else? So that's the main features. Oh, this is a 700C wheel bike. So the other good thing about this bike type, touring bikes in general, they can typically accommodate quite a large tire. I've got 700 by 35C tires on here, which I find is a good size for riding both pavement, dirt roads, and these smooth trails that we have around here. Now the trails I'm talking about are long, old rail trails that have been converted into bike and walking general all-purpose trails, but they put a fine stone dust on them and pack them down. So in most areas they're quite smooth, but there are some rougher sections. And this bike can do fine over the cobblier sections as well. If you were getting into a really rough cobble and jagged rocks and stuff, that's probably where you'd want to shift this bike, or get a gravel bike too with bigger tires. But this bike I think can take up to 40C tires as well, or bigger. So right now I've got this set up as a general all-round purpose type bike, and it does a pretty good job at it. It's not highly speedy, although it can go at a fairly good clip. Oh, the other real characteristic of a lot of touring bikes is they come with bar end shifters. Now, some people don't like those. I actually really like these. I find them quite easy to work. But some touring bikes now are obviously coming with the standard STI shifters as well, the index shift. These are actually index shifters, but you can use them as index or friction shifters. But you could also get them with the new, more modern STI shifters, or whatever they're called, where the brake lever and the shifters together. So some bikes come with either type. I actually like these, and this also has cantilever brakes. And an example of the Tektro cantilever brake. Nowadays, most bikes today have disc brakes, hydraulic or mechanical disc brakes. And this one just has quick release hubs, just with a little lever on one side and the hub comes off. Most bikes now are coming with through axles, and I can see the advantages of those, but otherwise, that's the way this bike is set up. It's got Shimano Dior LX rear derailleur, Sora Shimano in the front, and Tektro cantilever brakes and levers. So there you go. I think I just wanted to present this as sort of an all-round, do-it-all type bike, if that's the kind of bike you're interested in. I've really enjoyed it. There are times when I would like to get out on more pavement and have a speedier bike, I guess, or an easier rolling bike. Now this could get somewhat easier rolling too if I probably put 28mm tires on it or something. I'm sure it would become easier rolling and speedier in that regard, but it's probably not going to duplicate the frame geometry, the more compact frame geometry of a road bike or an endurance bike. So sometimes I think about getting an endurance bike just on those days when I want to go out and cover big distances quickly, just for a more aerobic bike ride challenge. This one will certainly give you lots of aerobic challenge too if you ride it hard. It's just you're not going to cover the same distance as quickly, but that's all in the way you look at it, I guess. Usually when I'm out on this, I'm just sort of touring and enjoying the countryside, so I'm not looking to just go from point A to B as fast as I can. But there are times when you might want to do that, and certainly times when I often like to do those types of challenges too. So, but if you're looking for a general all-round do-it-all type bike, I mean, you can look at touring bikes, and they're made by a lot of companies now. Here in North America, the ones I can think of are obviously Surly here with the long-haul truckers, or the disc truckers they call them. Then you've got Kona. Kona Bikes makes a Sutra model, which is their touring model. Trek makes their 520, and it's a really well-renowned bicycle. And there's Fuji, and there's a whole slew of other bikes. Anyhow, I hope that's giving you some information about your touring bikes. See, it's a good road riding bike. It's good for smoother trails and rough roads. It's comfortable. It's a fun bike to go out on, and can take you pretty well anywhere you want to go.